So I'm finally diving back into my video game build. I kind of left off with my prototype. So I did a lot of research when I started this. First of all, I'm a beginner with this, so I've been following tutorials on YouTube as well as Udemy and that kind of stuff to figure out how to work with Unreal Engine 5. I have experience using rendering, but it's more for the architectural side of stuff, so I use AutoCAD, Revit, Lumion, Twinmotion. Twinmotion is an Epic Games Unreal software, but it's much more dumbed down version for it's way more simplistic basically, so it's completely different than Unreal Engine 5. So anyway, from everything that I saw when it comes to starting a video game, and this is going to be my first video game, and I'm going for progress and completion over perfection. I am not going to be a perfectionist at this. I'm just not. I realize that the most important thing is to actually start the game and finish it, and it's probably going to take me like making many games to actually get something good. So my goal with this game is just to learn and to get it done and kind of do what I set out to do and figure it out as I go. I've been working with Unreal Engine 5 for about 6 months now at this point. Maybe a little bit more, but I've had some patches in there where I haven't really worked in it or touched it for a month or two on end. So anyway, all that to say, I've watched a ton of like beginner game dev videos, and everybody says when you start your first video game, you want to start with a prototype. A prototype should be ugly. It should be general massing blocks. It should be kind of claymation-y, like no materials, no props, no foliage, no sounds. It should really just be something quick and easy, kind of sandboxy, something that you're not married to where you can make changes and adjustments and you haven't already invested a bunch of time and effort and energy into it. So I got my prototype level to a place that I felt comfortable with. I think the scale is right for what I'm trying to do. I should explain what my goal is with this game. So I'm kind of going for a small game, of course, since it's my first creation, if you will. So I'm thinking maybe 10 to 30 minutes. I'm thinking it's going to be something that is a relaxing game, a calming game, something that you would play before bed, something that's could be appropriate for kids. There's no killing, no deaths, no bosses or enemies or anything like that. It's really just going to be kind of moody. I think the setting's going to be kind of like twilight or nighttime, and the goal is just to kind of walk around, and there's going to be sounds, and it's kind of just ASMR kind of vibes, and you collect. I'm thinking I'm going to have the character collect fireflies, so that just a bunch of these like glowing little orbs throughout the level that you collect as you go. And again, it's going to be something that you just play before you go to bed, something very calming and relaxing. You don't have to think about it. It's just more about the ambiance. Something that I found when I've been kind of learning Unreal Engine 5 for these last 6 to 12 months is it's such a massive, powerful program. You kind of have to focus on what's important to you and what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. For me, I'm less interested in the game mechanics of the character, and I'm more interested in the environment build. That's what I find enjoyable and interesting. So I figured this would kind of marry my two goals of one, creating a video game, and two, doing what I enjoy doing, which is environmental build. And that is materials, trees, the sky, the weather, the landscape, that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going with this game. Right now, what I'm doing is, because I'm at an okay place with my prototype level, I like the scale. I've kind of plotted out the different areas. So right here, what you're looking at is going to be kind of like a town that's nudged under this kind of large overhang, almost like a cave type thing, kind of medieval looking. Right behind it is going to be a forest. Across the bridge is going to be a cave, and then there's also going to be kind of a small lake on the other side. So I've kind of plotted it all out. I like where everything's laying out, And so now it's a matter of pulling in some meshes just to start to get some scale and visuals started. This is still very rough and dirty. I would still consider this prototype stage, but instead of cylinders, I'm pulling in some trees to get some volume. I'm pulling in some really generic meshes for the roofs, again, to get some volume and to kind of start to set up my scenes and the scale of everything. And so being a beginner, I figured going into this, it's kind of important to focus on where you want to spend your energy. For me, since this is my first creation, my energy needs to be toward actually getting the user interface down on the program, because this could end up taking forever if I start to get bogged down in trying to create all of my own custom components. Like, for example, some people are going to make their own trees, their own roofs, their own meshes and props and their own materials and all of that stuff. I am not going to do that, because otherwise this would just become a completely overwhelming build and it would probably never get done. And I think for me, the importance is to keep up the excitement and the energy and the interest. And in order to do that, I am just using expansion packs and things like that you can buy from Epic Games library, the marketplace. There's no need in my mind to reinvent the wheel when it comes to a roof for a house or a little well or a barrel or these trees, because that's not really what the focus of this game is. The focus of this game is not the tree. It's going to be the overall atmosphere and the creation. And to be honest with you, because I do plan on having this set at twilight or dusk or even at nighttime, maybe, you're not even going to see to that level of detail on a lot of this stuff because it's going to be in nighttime lighting. So again, it's really important to utilize these things that a lot of people have already put a lot of time and energy into making. I mean, there's people that literally just spend their entire time making trees or making, medieval castle components and that kind of stuff. So for me, I have absolutely no issue using those things. I did spend some money and purchase some of those packs on the marketplace. One of the things that I found that was really valuable so far that I've messed with is the Dynamic Skies. Brushify has some really excellent packs that I'm going to be using for this build. And then every single month I make sure to sign on to the Epic Games launcher and go to the marketplace and look at whatever is available free for the month. There's been some really great things that have been free for the month. I think those trees that you see here in the scene, as well as those roofs and the medieval town stuff, I think that was a free pack one of the months. So you just have to make sure you get on there every month and download whatever there is. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less that I'm interested, that I think I'd use. But anyway, so right now I'm kind of just rotating around as I go. I'm zooming out here, kind of getting a lay of the land. As you can see there, that's my lake off to the left. You can kind of see where the forest would be. This is going to be... And so every so often I stop and I do a play from here just to test it. And you can see right there I fell through the ground. I know what happened there. Earlier I was setting up the collisions for my little pond or lake. Yeah, there off to the left. And I probably selected the ground by mistake and set it to overlap with my character. So here I just have to reselect that portion of the land, or the landscape, if you will, and then change the collision back to block, so that from overlap to block, so that my character doesn't fall through the ground. And every so often in my process, I kind of stop and do a playthrough and just check my views, check the path, check the landscape, make sure I like the scale of everything, and that's kind of what I'm doing right here. I think the way that I'm going to do this video, and then I'll see how it turns out, but maybe futures as well, is do it more casually. So just kind of doing a voiceover, explaining the process, what I'm thinking, where I'm getting stuff from, inspiration, that kind of stuff, and then interjecting with some tidbits here and there. I'm not well versed enough yet in Unreal Engine 5 to where I can start giving real, probably beneficial advice on how to do certain things, but I will certainly include whatever I know and what I've learned to date. So here I'm just adjusting the landscape a little bit as I'm walking through, kind of getting low to the ground, checking my angles, looking to see if I like the way everything's looking, and just adjusting as I go. I think my plan of attack on this, now that I've kind of got the prototype step out of the way, after the prototype, I think I'm moving on to placing meshes and props. So that's going to be trees, houses, setting up my bridge, whatever else, set decorations, that kind of stuff. From there, I think I'll probably move on to landscape materials. After that, probably collectibles. So again, like I mentioned earlier, I think I'm going to do kind of like a glowing orb firefly collection. So I think I'll work on that after that. Set up my item collection blueprints, and then maybe last work on lighting, because like I said before, this is going to be kind of like a nighttime or evening lighting, and so I think that might go last. Now, I just want to say I'm probably doing some things a lot more harder than they need to be. I'm sure there's like 3 or 4 different ways to do any given thing, and I'm sure that there's probably a specific process that makes a lot more sense to do than maybe what I just said. But again, this is kind of learning as I go. You can only read about this and watch so many tutorial videos and Udemy courses and all of that before you just need to get into the program and start working with it and find out what works for you. And I've watched a lot of podcasts with beginner game devs, some of them who have gone on and made a really successful game, and they've all basically said the same thing, which is you really just kind of have to jump in and start working with it, and you're going to learn. It's going to be a learning process, and you're going to learn as you go, and it's going to take doing this 3, 4, 5, 6 times before you really get it down packed, and you learn some tips and tricks and learn how to do things more efficiently. And who knows, I might get through this whole process and get to the very end, and I might have made some kind of catastrophic mistake that I should have set up properly or in a better way early on that's impossible to fix later on or something like that. But I just won't know until I know. So right here, what I'm doing is pulling in some components. I think this is like a medieval pack that I loaded into this project, again, from the marketplace. This was, I believe this was a free pack maybe a few months ago, and it includes all of these meshes and props. Anyway, the reason that I'm pulling these in is that my personal process is I kind of think all together at once, if that makes sense. So like I mentioned before, or actually let me focus on this first and then I'll kind of give some context. So I'm just dragging in some different things to help set the stage. I might not end up keeping these for the final scene, but a few basic trees, some patches of grass, a fence, a wagon wheel there. I think I also pulled in a lamp and a lamp post, as well as like a well. I'm just trying to set the scene in general for kind of what I'm looking for. This is going to help me visualize. That's just how I work. I'll probably pull in different components and swap these out at some point in time and move them around, but this is just in my mind how I start to get the process going. Like I mentioned before, I'm coming from a background where I have a lot of experience doing 3D modeling and rendering, but it's on the architectural side. So building a 3D model architecturally to be actually constructed in real life is completely different than game dev. I mean, the principles are the same in terms of how the software works, but it's just completely different. So anyway, my point with bringing that up is, in general, that's the way I've worked architecturally is I kind of, when I'm laying out a floor plan in Revit, I'm also at the same time thinking of the landscape and the exterior elevations and the finishes. That's just how my brain works. I kind of think of everything all at once. And so in the same way, I'm kind of attacking this game build similarly. Like I'm doing the prototype, but in order to visualize and proceed with the design and see if I like stuff or don't like stuff, I kind of have to start bringing in props more early than maybe someone else would, just because it just helps me visualize it and set the scene and see if my ideas are translating the way I think that they are in my mind. So again, if you're more experienced, and I'm assuming that whoever's watching this video is either beginner level or like somewhere between beginner and intermediate, where you know the basics of Unreal Engine 5, but you're probably not going to be watching this if you know a lot more about game dev than I do. I'm sure this would be extremely tedious and boring to watch, but if you're more experienced, if you were to see this video, you might be like, oh, this is a completely wrong time to start pulling in props or stop placing them, or you should start with materials first or blueprints or whatever. I think the main takeaway that I got from a lot of these video game dev podcasts was that in general, when they all started out as beginners and newbies, and then worked on to become successful game devs, the one thing that they all said was not to let the fear of failure hold you back, or trying to be a perfectionist or doing it in the quote-unquote right way or the right order. Everybody's going to do things a little bit differently, and if you're more experienced, you're probably watching this and thinking, well, there's like a way more efficient to place these fences or the trees or the materials, whatever. But that's coming with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of experience under your belt. And like anything, it takes time to get to that point where you can become really efficient at stuff, and you know the tips and the tricks, and you know how to do things better. So I'm not there yet, and if you're a beginner, you're probably not there yet either. And I am just doing what makes the most logical sense in my mind. I'm doing what has worked for me in other types of 3D modeling and rendering situations that are different than game dev, but still. So that's kind of how I'm going about this build. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like I'm rambling at this point. And so right here, what I'm doing is I'm deleting my little placeholders for the forest, or the trees, if you will. Since I did pull in a tree mesh to start working with, I'm going to start basically plotting out the corners or the extents of my forest. That's what I'm doing right here, and I'm just copying those. I'm using the same tree and just kind of copying it and placing it at the various corners of the forest to get a feel for how big this forest is going to be. And like I said, deleting out those kind of placeholder prototype trees. And just to be clear, I don't think I mentioned it before, but this is not a tutorial on how to use Unreal Engine 5. This is more of a follow along with me as I build my first game as a beginner type of video series. Like I said, I am not well versed enough in Unreal Engine 5 that I have any business trying to teach other people how to use it. And really, that's just not what I'm focusing on with these videos. I think it's more that if anybody else is going along the same process with me and they're also trying to work on their first video game, I think this would just be a nice way to meet other newbie game devs and share tips and tricks and get people's feedback. It's more of that kind of a thing. With that said, though, I will try to make it a point to stop and explain any special things that I've learned, anything that's not that intuitive or obvious or something that took me a long time that I had to Google it or find it online. I haven't really done that yet so far in this video, just because everything has been fairly straightforward and super basic. And I should give some context to where I'm at skill-wise at this point in time. So like I said, I've been taking Udemy courses as well as tinkering with the program on my own and just trying to figure stuff out, as well as Googling, YouTube. And I've been in Unreal Engine 5 now, maybe about a year. That's not continuous and that's not full-time. I do have a full-time job, so this is kind of a hobby. This is like nights and weekends when I have time and energy and that kind of thing. So that's not a continuous amount of time that I've been working in or with Unreal Engine 5. But in case you're curious, that's about where my skill level is. This is my first game. I did build a full landscape environment level that was not intended to be a game. It was just more an environment build, more intended for like still shots and that kind of stuff, for rendering only. And that was really helpful. That was a huge learning curve, but I want to kind of take it to the next level with this and let this be my first game, my first playable game. So all that to say, that's kind of where I'm at skill wise with this particular game. Where I'm at is I'm about a month in from initial conception, that is like starting the game level, working on the prototype, making sure it's what I like. And again, not working on this full time. It's when I have the time and the energy. And I did have a major hiccup in my schedule because the computer that I had before was continually crashing, and so I finally took the plunge and made the investment to build my own PC, and I've got that video posted on my YouTube. If you're interested, you can watch the build there. I'd never built a PC before, but I did it and I love it. It's working great and it runs Unreal Engine 5 really well. So that kind of held me back, and that was kind of a delay in the schedule. And so now I'm back on it, and where I'm at is I'm going through now that I'm happy with the layout and the scale. I'm starting to delete those initial basic shape placeholders that were kind of holding space for the town and the trees and that kind of stuff, and I'm going to start deleting those out and replacing them with actual trees and meshes. And again, this is I have no doubt that those trees and maybe even the buildings and all this stuff will change. I might use something different as I move forward, but I'm just trying to set the scene right now and go into the next layer of detail. I don't want to spend too much time trying to find the perfect tree and the perfect house and the perfect bench and the perfect bush. I'm just trying to get stuff in that I have already in my library, using what I have, and then moving forward from there and making progress that way. And I'm pretty confident that this is going to be an iterative process. So I want to get enough props and set dressings in here to where I can then pull in my landscape materials, work on the lighting, add sounds, and then go back, replace trees, replace some props and set dressings and things that I don't like with something else, maybe adjust the lighting again, maybe adjust something in the landscape, and then kind of just do that over and over until I feel happy with where it's at, enough to where I can send it out as like a beta version to my closest friends to beta test for me. So that's kind of what my thought process is. And like I said before, I do plan on documenting this whole process. It will slow me down in terms of how much I'm able to get done on this game, because I'm gonna have to record it in spurts, edit those recordings, upload them to YouTube, and that obviously takes time. And again, this is not my full-time job. It's not like I have all day to do this. That's not an excuse. I think if you want something, you just do it and you make the time, and it's a priority for you. And this is a priority for me. This is like a bucket list thing that I want to do, is to complete a game. And so I'm making the time, and I'll figure it out. It might take me longer than normal, but it's okay. There's no rush. I mean, I'm fighting against the clock that I set for myself, is what it is. And I'm pretty good in my work life about being okay with good enough and setting a date and working toward that date and being able to make decisions to move forward, even if I feel like something isn't exactly perfect as it could be. And in that way, I've found in general, usually you cover a lot of ground and you make really good progress. Where I'm just not the kind of person that can stay and fine tune and perfect every little tiny nitpicky thing. I'm just not the kind of person that can be that anal about stuff. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just not my personal particular style. So this whole game dev process could take somebody a lot longer or a lot shorter, just depending on how efficient you are with the program, how much time you have, etc. So right here you can see that I am walking right through that boulder mesh. A lot of times I've noticed with packs that you download from the marketplace, they don't have a collision box set up with them, and it took me a long time to figure out how to not walk through things like that. So what you're seeing me do here is kind of test it. I'm trying to adjust the settings here, and then I'm off to the right. Unfortunately, it's cut off on the screen, but I'm setting up the collision so that it doesn't overlap with my mannequin as I walk. I want to walk on top of it, not through it. With water, for example, the collision is going to be set to overlap so that you walk through it. But with a rock, you're going to be walking on top of it, not through it. So it's just a different collision setting. I'll make sure to include that portion on my screen in the future when I'm recording these. That way you can fully see everything that I'm doing. So you can see here I've edited some things. It's still not working. And so now it's clued me in that the mesh itself did not have a collision box set up with it. So you have to actually edit the mesh itself. So what I'm going to do here in a second is go into the mesh. Here it is. And it's pretty simple. At the top toolbar, there's collision. You can add a collision as an orb, as a box, or as like a pill shape. So first I'm trying the box because it's kind of a boxy boulder, but this is going to have its own set of issues, and you'll see those in a second when I reload it in, because basically wherever that box is my mannequin is not going to be able to walk through, and you can see that box sticks out on the corner. So it's going to make for a funky interaction in the game, and it's going to look like my mannequin is floating, and you'll see that here in a second. Okay, so now we've reloaded it in, and you're going to see here that I can no longer walk through it, but now I'm kind of floating in the air on that corner, which is not what I want. That's just as weird as walking through the boulder. So I'm going to go back. I'm selecting that collision box. I'm deleting it, and I'm going to go with a different shape. So I'm going to go with the pill. It's kind of like it looks like a long. Yeah, there you go. I think this might work a little bit better. It's not perfect. I'm sure there's even a better way. What I would really like to do is to be able to just select that mesh and make the mesh itself be the collision, but I don't know how to do that yet. I will probably try to focus on doing that next here in a little bit after I finish editing this video. I really need to figure out how to make those meshes, the mesh itself, be the collision. Like I said, this is a learning curve, so this is not going to be all pretty and tied up in a perfect bow and look like everything's super easy and just works. This is going to be an actual process of a beginner dev trying to figure stuff out and why things aren't working. And I'm hoping that other people find this video and we can create like a little community here on YouTube, and we can share our tips and tricks and ideas and feedback and that kind of stuff, or just a place to talk and connect with other people that have similar interests and ask how their games are going, that kind of a thing. So, but yeah, so now that works better. You can see it's not perfect. I'm still kind of slightly hovering, and I could bring that collision bubble down just a hair so that I'm not floating so high above it. And I think I end up doing that here in a second, but you can see here I'm kind of hovering over these different options to see if there's like a better way to do this. And I'm sure there is. Like I said, I just need to do a little bit more research on how to make the mesh itself be the collision rather than adding a sphere as the collision. But for now, for the intents and purposes of what we're trying to do, I'm okay with it being a little funky in certain spots. And that's the kind of level of detail thing that I can do much later on. Like, what I want is to make, this is just a personal thing, but for me, I want to see visible progress each time I work on this for a few hours here and there. And if I spend 1 or 2 or 3 hours trying to research how to get this mesh to be exactly perfect in terms of how the collision works and that kind of stuff, not only did I not make actual progress on the build and setting up props and scene dressing and that kind of stuff, but if you start to do that over and over again, before you know it, you've spent 1 or 2 weeks working on finite little details that your game doesn't look any different, and you start to lose momentum in Steam. It's kind of like a mental thing too. So again, my thoughts on the process is work big picture, and then work macro, and then go micro. So big picture, and then get a little bit more detailed, and then a little bit more detailed, and then get into the fine tuning at the very end. And that's when I'll start to worry about the exact things like that boulder collision, for example. Right now, I just want to start placing stuff, start laying things out, get a lay of the land, start to feel scale, start to see if things look as pretty as I imagined in my head. And once I have all of those bits in, then I can start to work on laying out my collectibles, the blueprints, and all that other stuff. Eventually, I would like to work on learning mechanics for my mannequin and blueprints and stuff, but that's like a whole nother level to Unreal Engine 5 that I have not even dabbled into. I mean, you could literally just spend months on just environment builds and brushes and sculpting and pulling in meshes and set props and working with water and all of that. Like, that alone could take you forever. So back to the game, what you're seeing me do right now is place railing along where my bridge is going to go. I don't want my mannequin to be able to jump up on that railing or over it. So again, I'm going to edit this mesh, and I'm going to add a collision to it. The nice thing about this one is the collision came in exactly the size of the mesh, but I want it to be a little higher because I want to create kind of like an invisible wall there that my character cannot go over. And then we're going to test it right now, and you'll see that it works. And this is kind of like that age-old invisible barrier that we're all used to in video games. And that's just going to prevent my guy from going off the edge. I'll probably add, and again, there's probably multiple ways to achieve that. I'm sure there's some kind of invisible shape box that I could place there and get the same effect of preventing my mannequin from falling off the edge into that ravine. But this is what makes the most sense to me, and this is just what I'm going to do. And in general, I'll probably use that railing in other places in the level just as set dressing and props, probably not as a barrier to a steep edge, but maybe just, you know, over here by the houses and stuff. But I'm okay with my mannequin not jumping on that railing. That's really not the point of this game. So I'm trying to stay focused on what exactly I'm trying to do here, and I'm not going to get bogged down or sidetracked with mechanics and other things that don't really have anything to do with this game. Again, the point of this game is relaxation, walking, ASMR, item collection, kind of, you're not having to think about it. There's no kills, there's no deaths, there's no enemies. That's not really what this is about. It's just kind of a cozy game before nighttime type of thing. So we don't need our mannequin to be jumping up on buildings or on scaling roofs or railings or anything like that. So, I mean, we're still at the very beginning kind of phases of this game build, and there's a lot more to come. So I think this first video is kind of just introductory, just kind of talking over it, just getting a feel for how my voiceover is going to go, kind of explaining my thought process and stuff. But as I move forward, I'll try to make a concerted effort to not say so much, number one, and to try to have a script ready, try to have a few main points or things that I want to focus on. I can't promise that, but I will try to make these a little bit more concise and less rambly, and hopefully a little bit more helpful. Like I said, I don't intend for these to be Unreal Engine 5 tutorials. Like, I'm not going to explain every single basic toolbar that I'm pulling up or where I'm getting a mesh from or anything, or, you know, that kind of stuff, but just more learning as I go and kind of explaining the process if I run into issues or whatever, sharing my knowledge on those types of things. But it's not going to be an exhaustive, super detailed tutorial on how to use Unreal Engine 5 or do every single thing. I will try my best, though. I know, you know, if you're spending the time to watch this, first of all, thank you, and second of all, I've watched a ton of tutorials. Some of them have voiceovers, some of them don't, some of them have text, some of them are highly detailed and explain every single thing, some just kind of give you tips and tricks, and I find every kind of version of these videos are helpful in some way. So hopefully this will help somebody, even if it's just for you to kind of get a feel for, like, hey, I'm on this journey. Is anybody else experiencing the same thing, or does anybody else feel the same way that I am in terms of how I'm building this build? Am I doing it right? I think sometimes it's easy to try to compare yourself to all these super nice and tidy, shiny, perfect videos and feel like, wow, this is like way over my head. I don't think I could ever produce something like that. So this is going to be a little dirty, a little rustic, but it's okay. So right now what I'm doing is I started where my game start's going to be, and I'm just kind of doing a dry run through of the little village area. That's going to be kind of like a cliff overhang above, and I'm going to have a lot of growies and danglies and vines and stuff kind of hanging over it. I want it to kind of look a little bit overgrown and jungly. Probably some little puddles of water here and there from the water dripping from above. I think right here what I'm doing is I'm pulling in some like boulder meshes, I believe, or some cliffside meshes. So we can kind of start to set up that cliffside behind the village. Let's see. Yep, yeah. So I'm gonna start to set that in place. Again, we're pulling in what we've got in the library, and don't feel like you have to spend tons of money. I did buy a few packs that I thought were going to be really valuable to me, like Ultra Dynamic Sky, and I did buy a couple of Brushify packs that I felt had a lot of really good meshes and stuff, like cliffs and long distance mountains for the background and that kind of stuff. But a lot of these other things I've just signed on every month for the free stuff for the month and just download it. Anything that I want that I think I'll use, I download so that it's in my library, and then you get to keep it. So, and there's a lot of really nice stuff in there. So yeah. Anyway, I think these cliffs came from a Brushify pack, and I used these on my previous environmental build, and I really like them a lot. And you can go through and edit the color tone on those and the material and that kind of stuff. And the nice thing is using Brushify is whenever you use the meshes, the materials exactly match on the mesh as they do with the materials that I would paint on my landscape, so that it's a very cohesive look with your materials, and everything matches really well. So that is a nice benefit of using Brushify. So here I've placed those cliffs. I'm going to start to get a feel of how that feels behind the village. I don't know if I love that. I'll probably go back and adjust it, but I'm just trying to get a feel for the scale. I might push that cliff, or that cliff edge a little bit further back. I think it's a little too close to those houses, and right now I'm just kind of plopping a few trees in between these village homes. I think this one I'm going to make small so it kind of looks like a little baby tree growing up against the house. Yeah. There we go. And yeah, I'm just kind of working through and just copying the same tree over and over and over again. I have a bunch of Megascan trees from Marketplace, and I think a lot of those are actually free. I do believe that a lot of them are free. And those have a huge variety. Those are a little bit more not complicated, but time intensive in terms of setting up with your foliage. This tree in particular that I'm copying and pasting is just a component, if you will, or a mesh that came with that medieval pack. And so it's a lot easier to work with this right now, but I'll go back through and add in a variety of other trees later on, but I'm not really worried about that. So again, kind of working big and getting into higher and higher levels of detail as we go through. So I think this video is coming to an end. We're already about 40 minutes long. The next one, I think I'll try to have a more concise script. I'll try to make sure I include more of the screen so you can see exactly what's going on in the toolbars on the right and left. And then hopefully on the next one I'll be in a little bit more detail, so I'll be able to get into some more details about the actual process of what I'm doing and pulling in meshes and that kind of stuff. But this one was just kind of an introductory, just a high level voiceover, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll return for more videos. I anticipate there'll be many more to come to get from here to a final product, and I'll be going over pulling in lighting and sounds and all of it. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for watching.